So it's, basically trying to hit a semester's worth of Latin almost in 3 weeks. So that means getting I don't know, it's like starting from ground zero.
Yeah.
How the language works, and it's kind of funny. So it's see, Dick, run, Dick, run at the very beginning.
Right, yeah.
But, getting all the way through, pages of Latin. So within 3 weeks, really moving from kindergarten level stuff up to easily, middle school age stuff. While we're learning the language and, several hundred vocab words in 3 weeks, we do a lot of culture stuff as well. So we learned about archaeology, how some of the field of archaeology developed in terms of the story of Troy, whether it was real or not, just as an example. We talk about history, sociology, big issues and small issues, so just as important, how did Rome fall? We talk about how did a Roman eat? How did a Roman sleep? What was it like for a rich person versus a poor person versus an average middle class person, the way pretty much everybody at JBA is. Religion, I'm trying to think, family life. We can't send the kids to Rome to find out what it's like to live like a Roman, so as much as humanly possible, I try to bring whatever possible here and, let the kids see what it's like to be a Roman that way. As far as a foreign language goes, Latin is, I guess, sort of an unusual one because, if you're going to take Italian, like the first session would be, you have that end goal, if you will, of going to Italy and surviving there, or at least visiting there, what have you, and we don't have ancient Rome to go to. So for these kids, just as much as for me as a grad student when I was in school, the words are the place. And so it's a lot less speaking, especially in terms of conversational speaking, and it's more preparation for reading, diving into a poem of Horace, or, looking at part of a play by Terence or Plautus. So it's an interesting thing in that way, and it's, for some people unexpected that the book is the destination. And some people love that. That's certainly where I come from, that, reading becomes even more important when it's the end. The way we can learn about these people is when we're lucky finding physical remnants of them, but for the most part, it's the words that have been handed down for us. So, we definitely do a lot of stuff out loud because it's a good way to learn, just mixing up speaking, reading, saying. But the further JBA goes along, the more we're reading. At the beginning, when all you have is, the girl is happy, we can translate that, we can say it out loud, we can do so many things, but we're already to the point where the kids are sitting down and reading, a 50-line paragraph of Latin, and we just are sort of building with that stuff more and more and more. Some kids clearly have read things like parts of Homer's Iliad ahead of time. I bring a bunch of books to class, basically impromptu learning library or lending library, and the kids can take stuff out if they want to, and so some kids are reading, some Virgil right now in translation, or picking up a history book. So some kids really dive into that. Some kids do want to learn how to say hello in Latin and thank you in Latin, and so some kids latch onto it that way. It's a really interesting thing that I think, when you have a mix of 17 kids, you see so many different little angles on what grab them. Some kids really attached to the art when we finally talk about that, or like I said, the archaeology, the history, it's really particular almost to every single student. I think if you broke it down, there are probably 17 different ways for 17 kids that they attach to the material, and they all find one way. That's one of the things that when I look at those applications, I want to make sure that somebody that's coming to this class really wants to dive into it, because 3 weeks, 6 hours a day, that's a lot of time to be spending on one topic. So if you have a very casual interest in history or in language, this is not the thing for you. I don't want to make anybody's life miserable. We want JBA to definitely be fun, a challenging experience for sure. We know these kids, I never remember the exact line, but what word for eminent scholars or something like that. So we want to make sure that we're going to challenge them with that, but also make sure that they have fun doing that. And I think that that's one of the things why it's fun for me to teach this, is that, I'm challenged by their pace, by their appetite for learning, and I just want to make sure everybody has that appetite. It's just to make it a worthwhile experience for them. So it's a fun thing, and I think they learn from each other too. Where one kid might come in as interested in, I don't know, I want to be a vet, and so I want to learn Latin words that have to do with animals. They might find out, oh, I actually do like history, and I never really knew it before, and vice versa. So that's a cool thing too. When they see each other excited, they really learn about that. I mean, it really sort of is, infectious in a good way. Not wanting to insult college kids too much, you have to admit that there are times, since we have requirements, some kids are taking a Latin class because it fills a slot in time and it's less painful than another class. And it's sort of an ugly truth, but that's the way it is. I have 17 students who love to be in class, and that's like a teacher's dream, to come in and have, when I ask a question, 17 hands going up. So on an interest level, at least compared to certain students, and of course the Truman, I'm talking about the minority, the small minority of kids who are there just because they have to be, but there are still kids there who it is sort of an interest, and they'll take one semester of it and then move on to their whatever major, biology, business, pre-law, whatever, and that's totally fine. But kids have an interest in JBA, that's phenomenal. And again, I really bet that I have kids who could take that college class right now and do just as well as the college students. That's one of those things. Honestly, there are some kids who can't do it because they're 13. I mean, it's like they don't have the stamina yet to be able to stretch out for a whole semester, but they're darn close. I mean, and I really think that on pure intellectual level, they stand right up there with the college kids. And it's just a matter of the college kids have lived more life and kind of just know how to do it better, how to cope with getting up every day and being tired and still paying attention. That's just, these kids will learn that in high school. They'll learn it when they come back to JBA next year. But it's amazing. I mean, I really would say that they totally stand equal and sometimes even above, again, because of that intensity. I mean, it's kind of shocking sometimes. Yeah. When somebody's putting the homework in front of you, it makes you have to do this work. So I think in a way, just to sort of keep that book on your shelf, look at those notes that you were taking, remind yourself that it was something you were interested in, and it doesn't have to be something that, the book we use as a textbook is only part 1 of 3. It's not that you have to go out and buy part 2 and part 3 and, every week do a chapter, say. It's just to remind yourself that this happened. And, I would be perfectly happy if my JBA students never do any Latin again, but from this experience, they remember how exciting it is to learn, and to learn when you don't have to learn. I mean, because, once they come here, they have to do it. They've signed on, but they volunteered to do JBA. And, if mom and dad are paying for it and all that kind of stuff, they might kind of forget that this is totally voluntary. But that's something I think they should be reminded of, and they should be proud of. And just to see whether it's the JBA video on their shelf, my textbook, a picture of a friend, that this happened, I think can be its own inspiration. And then it just reminds you that learning is an exploration, is something that can always be happening, and can be, I want a word stronger than fun, that, it could be life-changing, sort of, not to get too eloquent or grandiloquent, really. But I think it's just remembering that this is something that happened in their lives can stretch for a long, long time, I think. I didn't have an experience like this when I was in high school, and man, I wish I would have. I mean, I was happy in high school. I did well. I just wonder what I could have done if I had this in the middle. How much further I might have gone. I mean, I think it's a life-changing thing. It's not just an education-changing thing for them. So this is my 9th time teaching JBA. It's exhausting, clearly. From year to year, you have things like thunderstorms at 2 in the morning that make it more exhausting. But I always keep coming back because JBA is an amazing experience. I mean, it just as exhausting as it is in the short term, it's rewarding in the long term. It's sort of re-energizing in the long term from a teacher's side of it. And I think that it's the same way from the students, that it reminds them of how fun learning can be. And I don't know, it's like nothing else I've ever done. I know that it's one of those things that it's not for everybody because it's so intense, but but if you can kind of figure out what you can get out of JBA, it's a really great thing, I think, from everything. I would imagine that the preceptors say the same thing. You know, you as a videographer say that. I mean, just to see this whole thing, it's so peculiar, but in the best possible way of peculiar, that, you know, I don't know how many times I'll get to do this, but I'm happy for every time